Everybody settled in? Good evening. Ready to call this meeting to order. This is the February 18th Planning Commission Board of Zoning and Appeals meeting. And we'll have a roll call, starting from my right.
Marla Canfield.
Eric Peterson.
Bill Schnauber.
Gary Israel. Alex Zarchin.
Matthew Rossi.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the January 21st, 2020 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I, Eric Peterson, make a motion that we approve the minutes of the January 21st, 2020 Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeal minutes as written.
We have a motion to approve.
I, Gary Israel, second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
One
Have
abstain.
one abstention. Okay, thank you. Any staff report? Les?
We just wanted to welcome Matthew Rossi, our newest member to the bench.
Thank you, Matthew. You bet. Anything else from committee?
No, sir.
All right, potential residential development report. Les, any comments on that?
No comment.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, having been to the subdivision committee meeting on the 11th, I just thought it was quite interesting that for 2019, we had 80 new family or 80 single family permits and 30 two-family building permits. And it looks like right now we're 14 single family and 13 two-family permits.
14 today? That's good news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, nothing further, then we're going to move on to item number 5. Final planned unit development, review of the Summerlin addition final planned unit development plan located east of North 159th Street East and south of East 21st Street, Andover, Kansas. Comment staff and subdivision committee have reviewed the final PUD and recommend approval. Okay. Les, any comments?
You'll remember that this planned unit development was amended a few months ago to slightly increase the density, added a couple of lots. They've now been through the process and redrafted the final PUD plan. It's been to the subdivision committee. There were a few comments coming out of subdivision committee that have been addressed on this final version, and staff and subdivision committee recommend approval.
Any comments from committee?
No. I had some about the subdivision and Les just addressed them.
Okay.
I'm fine.
All right then. Looking for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I, Gary Israel, make a motion that we approve final planned unit development for Summerlin Addition development located at east of North 159th Street East and south of East 21st Street, Andover, Kansas.
I have a motion to approve.
I, Eric Peterson, second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right then, item number 6, final plat. Review of the Sandstone Meadows First Edition Final Plat located at Cornerstone Parkway at North Andover Road, Andover, Kansas. Staff and the subdivision committee have reviewed the final PUD plan and recommend approval. Wes, anything there?
Over the past several months, you've seen this property several times. It was first annexed, and then there was a zoning case and a preliminary plat. This is the first phase final plat. Subdivision committee reviewed it at their meeting a couple of weeks ago. There were several comments that were addressed by the applicant, and again, staff and subdivision committee recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
No.
I do have a question, because is there still supposed to be a cul-de-sac housing section in the very front of that development? Okay, I'm seeing it up there. I'm just looking through all the various papers that have been turned in. Okay, so that is still part of the final plan.
Further questions? Looking for a motion?
sir.
I'll make a motion. I, Alex Zarchin, make a motion that we approve the final plat for the Sandstone Meadows First Edition final plat located at Cornerstone Parkway and North Andover Road, Andover, Kansas.
Have a
I,
motion to
Matthew,
approve?
oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
I, Matthew Rossi, second that motion.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes. Thank you. Okay. Item number 7. Case number Z 2020-02. It's a public hearing and recommendation on the proposed amendment to the Green Valley Greens planned unit development to change the existing parcel 16 underlying zoning district classification from an R4 multiple family residential district to the MXR multiple family mixed residential district generally located at 800 West Highway 54, Andover, Kansas. Comments, the applicant seeks relief from the existing PUD text, which limits the use of the property currently zoned R4 multiple family residential district to use as a church and some related accessory uses because the previous owner, Revelation Ministries, has abandoned their plans to build a church and sold the property at auction. The applicant desires a change in zoning district classification to reflect the current MXR multiple family mixed residential district to accommodate a multifamily development at a maximum residential density of 20 dwelling units per acre, as suggested by the comprehensive plan and US 54-400 corridor study. I'd like to open up here. There are some ground rules I'd like to explain. It's important that you present any facts or views you have as evidence so that an informed recommendation can be made by the Planning Commission to the governing body for their final decision. By state statute, the governing body does not have to hold another public hearing on the matter, although they may listen to whomever they wish. You will be asked if there are any new information which was not heard at this hearing. It is to everyone's advantage if you present all the necessary information at this hearing. After the city zoning administrator provides the commission with background information, I will call upon the applicant. Public comments will be heard following the applicant. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The Planning Commission will close the hearing to public comments and will then consider the 14 factors on which to base their recommendation. During this time, the Commission may direct questions to the applicant, the public, and/or city staff. You should be aware that the Planning Commission can recommend that the site be platted or replatted if necessary, and that a site plan may be required for approval. You should be aware that any uses permitted outright in a district by the regulations can receive a zoning permit. Furthermore, if the applicant chooses to describe various features of their development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson, give their name and address. Please use the podium over here. Speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. At this time, I'm asking any disqualifications.
No.
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 Right. Yes.
I didn't know the order. My fault.
Official notice for this hearing was published in the Butler County Times-Gazette on January 25th, 2020, and notices were mailed to the applicant and 68 real property owners of record in the area of notification on January 21st, 2020. The record shows that at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there is evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I will declare that proper notification has been given. Has there been any ex parte communications?
No.
No.
No, sir.
At this time, I call upon Les Mangus to give us any information that he has available.
I think your opening statement did a pretty good job of explaining what the applicant's here asking tonight. The property is currently zoned R4 multifamily residential district. However, the PUD overlay limits the use to a church and those accessory uses, a senior center, a child care center, educational facilities and the like. The applicant here is just looking for some relief from that very limited scope of permitted uses.
Okay. Any questions for Steve?
No.
Not at this time.
Okay. At this time, I now call upon the applicant to make a presentation.
Good evening, Chairman and Planning Commissioners. I'm Jason Gish with MKEC Engineering, representing our applicant. I have several of us here present and would be able to answer any questions at the anytime upon that you may have questions anytime during this presentation. But I did want to start out by trying to provide some definition and a little bit of clarity on exactly kind of what we're proposing to give you a better idea of what it could look like. Okay. So you're well aware this is a parcel within an existing PUD, a greater PUD, and that planned unit development has been around for decades, I believe. Sometime in the 90s, it's been amended a couple different times, and before the last amendment, it did in fact hold zoning that would accommodate what we're asking you here this evening. So when Mr. Mangus explained that we're just looking for basically a striking of a portion of what was in the original PUD, it would basically erase those limitations that just took away the multifamily uses and restricted it more to the church and kind of those related elements. So just as part of the process, it's required, and so the public would understand, per the city regulations of a zoning request, we go out and we have a 200-foot notice area, and then when it's adjacent to an existing PUD or a part of an existing PUD, that extends to 500 feet. So therefore, that's just what that looks like. That's the rules. But of course, we understand and we hope, and I think I've understood that the homeowner association is well aware of this. So I'm glad that that's the case so that everybody gets a clear understanding of what we're asking for here. So, I wanted to just give you some background into the corridor study and the comprehensive plan and what those things are precedents here already in the materials that the city has worked on over the years and the experts you've hired. So currently the zoning along US 54, as you well know, is set up for primarily the commercial uses. As you can see with the marketplace and current zone, the Dillons, Atwoods, things of that nature. Then back over here to the west, there's more on the south side. Currently, commercial type uses occurring on limited seasonal basis over here at 159th and Kellogg. And so therefore, this MXR that's shown here on the subject property as it's defined is what we call a transitional zone, which allows a buffer, if you will, in a zoning use or from a single family to a higher density. And so MXR is what this is depicting in the plan. And so we think that's a good transitional zoning. It's recommended. And as I was mentioning, it buffers, it kind of creates a way to block noise and do things like that. You probably wouldn't enjoy having your single family residence right here on the highway. And of course, it's planned for expansion as KDOT funds allow. So moving into the detail of this is what the PUD prior to tonight looks like, or prior to what we're asking for. There's the parcel. This is the language associated with that parcel. And as you can see, the land use is up here. Church, senior center, child care. Had a 45-foot height limit. There were setbacks, parking, and a small buffer was kind of required along this north edge. And what we're really doing by adding this additional language, this is what we're presenting this evening for your consideration, is a bolstering of this language. And what we're really trying to do is provide not only definition for what can happen in here by setting building areas, percentages of use, if you will, on the parcel, but it's also defining what protections there would be and transition, if you will, to the existing single-family neighborhood that's there today. So, sorry, this cut off a little bit on our slide, but these uses are appropriate with what is in the corridor study as this lifestyle corridor, where you're trying to offer up additional types of residential opportunities. So, as I mentioned, we have building coverage, we have setbacks called out in detail. We call for architectural controls, and so that we have a way that the site plan review committee, which is another process altogether, but we're kind of setting the foundation to give anybody on this parcel rules, some parameters with which to work within. So if you recall, the original or the existing last group that was here, my understanding is with the church it was a large facility, I think like 700 maybe at a service or seating capacity. So it'd be a very large structure, single kind of structure, very tall roof, and then it was primarily a metal building construction. So we think that what we're proposing here is probably going to be very much more in compliance with being a little more architecturally compatible with the neighborhood, and so we think that's a good thing. We're going to have things provided in here that call for enclosure of dumpsters, if there were such things as rooftop equipment, that stuff gets screened. Lighting, one thing really nice about this is being of residential character with a multifamily use that we're asking for, we're going to not allow flood lighting that you see on many commercial type structures where it just kind of glares at you. That's not what we're after here at all. I want it to be very much more like a residential use. We have parking lot lighting, if you will. The poles would be limited in height when they get within a distance of the residential, 200 feet. Of course, this is already kind of a standard, but we're just restating that in the PUD of light cutoffs, so you don't have light leaking out beyond property boundaries. And then the big thing, I think, that is really good with what's being proposed here are just the landscape. A lot can be done with landscape and softening and transitioning, and so we've really worked on buffer requirements and then kind of spelling out what does that mean. And further, this is an excerpt out of the kind of the corridor study, and I just wanted to kind of hit and highlight there what it says. It says that City of Andover desires to offer housing products that cater to residents in all segments of life and all stages of life, so that they can create a more constant and lasting community. So diversity of what is offered in the neighborhood, so you're just not a mono nature type of city. And this would help overcome Andover's reputation of being a place for people to move for the schools. When the last child graduates, they move on. So we're really trying to, if you look at what the observation has been by those that have been helping trying to plan the city for the future and to be all-encompassing so you have a healthy community, it is recommended that you have different housing options, different types of housing for people to live. And of course, here's kind of more of that just highlighted. Provides housing diversity and affordability. Implement multifamily housing recommendations in the US 54-400 corridor study. So those are goals that have been thought of by your predecessors and probably some of you in trying to create a city with more options. This here is simply, I'm not going to get into the detail of this, but these are just little snippets out of the corridor study that talk about transportation and traffic. And a lot of time and effort has been done to make improvements in the city as time goes on and understanding for the backage road, how traffic would be handled. This is obviously showing the improved freeway. But all of these things, this here is a kind of a, it's depicting what can happen for traffic counts and turns and very, I guess, detailed traffic engineering information. So all these things are supporting what is proposed in the zoning and the comprehensive plan and corridor study for this to be a multifamily type use. This is a concept only, but just wanted to give you an idea of what this might look like as far as a buffering plan. This is one wood. I apologize again, this is slid over, but you can sort of get the idea of what we're showing and stating in the PUD. This is a visual aid of what that would mean. And so for every 100 feet, we're recommending and saying that we would install 2 deciduous trees, 2 ornamental trees, and 2 evergreen trees every 100 lineal feet along this north edge between the currently platted Backage Road and Green Valley Green. So then on the south side, we even have additional trees. So when you add this up and you compare it to the recommended landscape buffer that's inside your code in the development manual, it suggests we're almost 3 times more than what's recommended in the code. So it has like 2.5 trees per 100 lineal foot. That's what it equates to. So we feel that we've really bolstered that and created a nice friendly edge. these are just some quick ideas of what it would kind of look like north to south. This being the neighborhood, this being the property line of the neighborhood, the south property line. Just wanted to point out the distances here, and I might have to have my colleague remind me what these are. I can get to them here. Hold on. My glasses aren't strong enough. So to give you an idea of kind of what is being proposed to the actual unit that we depicted in the site plan, this is a distance of 230 feet from the property line to the actual building face in that example that we showed. So as I mentioned, here's that reserve space. It's 30 foot in width. The zoning only requires 15, and so you not only have the space of this being doubled, you have the right-of-way of the backage road, and then you know, before you even get to the property where the improvement would be made. Just wanted to point that out. This is a 2-story unit. This is 3-story. Kind of gives you the trajectory back and forth of what that happens. But just keep in mind, we got a lot of room for green space and just distance. Same thing here. This is kind of giving you an idea of kind of what this looks like. This once again being the neighborhood, south property line, and the distances. So that's kind of that, just in black and white, just a concept. We think it's a very practical layout. There's Onewood. There'd be no access proposed on Onewood. We believe that the ground kind of works out nicely, that this would be detention that would be necessary down here on the west edge. Main entrance would be somewhere along the backage road. We're depicting it here. That might be a clubhouse amenity. So you get the idea that we've graduated this, and there's ways to make this all work, I think, quite nicely. These are some examples that the architect with us this evening has shown to the applicant, and so these are just some ideas of what it might look like, some of the character. So you can see the very residential use, mix of materials, opportunities for covered porch or things of that nature, terraces, balconies. This is just part of the requirements of kind of what is in the submittal. This depicts the sidewalks that would be constructed or proposed, and those are highlighted. There's an option where there could be a walk over here. That's of no argument from us, but we do think it's important to get this connection here on the south edge, and there could be connections for this neighborhood to tie into, to make their way to future connections that the backage road would provide. And then just to give you a little bit of an idea of what this would look like when the highway is constructed, there's been a tremendous amount of pre-development or pre-design, if you will, for the freeway, and it's this darker gray shade. There would actually be, Onewood would be a crossing over the top. So the way this would work here is the highway is about 11 feet plus depressed from the current ground. And so for this to all work out geometrically and to meet the profile that they were doing, that kind of pushes this up. So these are, I don't know if these are zoning related. I'm just giving you a little bit of context here. What we found as we looked at this for our client. This ends up being several feet, like 13 feet or 11 feet above existing grade. Let me get this right. Yeah, about 13 feet above existing grade as it is today. And then the frontage road that would be associated with the highway, the one-way frontage road here, that's about 10 feet. So it's quite elevated, so there'd be an embankment or something here, but from just a designer's perspective, my perspective, I think it's kind of nice to have some buffering and relief in the way of of a larger residential product to kind of help screen the highway and actually probably add some benefit to the noise reduction and such. Keep in mind the main line's suppressed, so that's going to be huge. I think that was a nice service design idea that the city worked with their consultant on. And once again, I apologize, some of these are broken off on the side or cut off rather. But just trying to look at what you all have to look at this evening. You know, there's been a lot of investment that you've done with all the studies and experts that you brought in on the corridor study and your comprehensive plan. This is trying to meet that same or reflect that goal of what we read in the study. These are off, but what we're trying to highlight here is there's a strong demand. There's a strong demand in the city for quality rental homes. Once again, as I said, our point here is there's mid-rise dwelling units are suitable given they will serve as a buffer to the single-family homes to the north from increased highway traffic as improvements are made through time. The height of the buildings proposed are 2 and 3 story, which is compatible due to our buffers and landscape. The project, the comprehensive plan is suggesting between 1,700 and almost 6,000 dwelling units be added along the US 54 corridor. So this would just be a small token of what that could be. This would, at 20 dwelling units per acre, at about 11 dwelling units, we're just shy, I think, of 240 dwelling units total. So that kind of gives you an idea that this would be a small implementation of what the comprehensive plan was striving for. Just as you well know, as planning commissioners, vacant property will continue to be developed. The city will grow. Schools will grow, parks will grow, amenities will grow, traffic will grow. But if it's all done in an orderly manner with proper planning and due diligence, I mean, that's your goal. That's why we're here. And of course, we see this as a privately funded multifamily project with local investment and local designers, engineers, architects. So with that, I'd stand for any questions or try to clarify anything that was spoken of there.
Thank you. Any questions, gentlemen? Mark?
I do. You talked about both 2-story and 3-story in the plan. Has there been given any thought to kind of how and where and what that might look like?
Certainly. So the current PUD language, I believe we have 45-foot height limit set in there, and with that, we are suggesting in our plan we could, the land actually has, there's more opportunity to, if I could say more, you could put more density there, but as part of the PUD, there's a limit in the whole master plan PUD that has like 644 units, I believe, dwelling units total. Brian's going to fix me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what we have. I'll get it here in front of me. And so this is just there's a limit in the PUD unless somebody would want to come back and ask that be increased. We're keeping in, and actually there's still dwelling units available in the master PUD for the last parcel besides this one that hasn't been developed would be the one where the fireworks and those activities are happening there in the corner.
Right.
So in our master plan, we think that based on the density, what we'd be able to maximize on, there's opportunity where 2-story could occur as it's closer here to the residential, and then the higher stories could occur further away. But that's not been developed very far yet. That's an idea.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Gary, did you?
Yeah, that answers my question. I was just thinking, if I was living in Green Valley, I wouldn't want to be right next to a 3-story apartment.
Certainly. And that's why we wanted to show you in those exhibits kind of what those distances are, just to provide some idea of how far away these are. So, we have half a football field just from the property line, and this example here of what that is. So at least it's not towering over, throwing shade in your backyard, things of that nature.
Silly question, but backage road's a new term for me. Is that one lane each way?
So, the backage road is basically, it serves kind of as a local street or corridor for local street traffic that's not on the highway. So it's not meant to be on the highway. It provides local street traffic to get in and around without having to get out there on the highway. And Les could probably expand upon that. I probably did a poor job.
I was just trying to visualize the width, and it's 1 and 1, right? One
It's
each
kind of
lane
a
each way.
3-lane, so it would have a turn lane, but I think that's all subject to final
Okay.
design. I mean, but the corridor study kind of defines it as a 3-lane street.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question. Excuse me. So on those trees, that landscape buffer, how long do you expect it to take to get to on that sight line you're talking about? I mean, you plant saplings. What do you propose to plant there?
Well, once again, this would all have to go through site plan review,
Okay.
but typical tree that gets planted on this type of a project would be in that 2-inch caliper range. And so, yeah, so that's what most trees are.
Please.
So that gives you, on a deciduous tree, kind of a 12, 14 foot plus tree. On a evergreen type tree, that puts you kind of in that 8-foot range. And on an ornamental tree, they're a little bit, usually they're just a little bit shorter stature type of tree. So they're probably going to be in that 8 to 10 foot range. 10, maybe 12, it just depends on the species.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know what the unit density would be as if everything was limited to just a 2-story building?
I don't know that we've tried to run that exercise, tried to figure that out, but
On how many units that would create then?
So
Not sure.
I think we really want to have a combination, or the opportunity to do that combination. I think that'd look very much, I think there's a good example would be the one that you've already seen built that's in the marketplace area, Sunstone, I think.
Any further questions for the applicant?
No, sir.
At the moment.
Okay.
Not at this time.
Mr. Gish, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to call and see if there are any public comments to be made. Again, as you come up, it's going to be first come, first serve. Name and address, if you will. And once again, if we have a large crowd here, we want to hear as many comments as we can. If they are new comments, then you're more than welcome to come on up and let us know how you feel about all this and what your questions are. We may not be able to answer your question as you are at the podium, but if there are questions for the applicant after that, then he has another opportunity to address the podium and answer those questions for you. Okay? All right, anyone from the audience? Yes, sir.
It's my first time at this, so it might be a little awkward. My name's Mick Coble. I live at 239 South Onewood. My concern is the multiple family units. I do not want to see that there. I know that there's probably nothing I'm going to be able to do about it. But over the years, I've been at that address since September of 2001. And over the years, we've seen other units being added in that area. And all it does is add traffic congestions to that area. We've had problems with people speeding up and down the street over the years. Nothing ever gets done about it. So my concern here, where the gentleman said there would be no entry off of Onewood, but he didn't say where the entries are. I would like to know where they are, and I would like to see single-family units in there versus apartments. That's all I got.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Darren Deitcher, and I live at 813 Sandwich Court. Several statements here. That highway that he so illustriously explained to you was going to take care of all of this traffic, that's 20, 30 years down the road, folks. That's not going to take care of any of the traffic going on here for any of us that live here now. 200 units, that's what I heard. Now I'm hearing 600. I'm not sure I am understanding how many they're actually going to have there. That's 200 cars a day cutting through our neighborhood to get out to Andover Road, because that fancy little road they have there goes nowhere except right onto Onewood. It does not go you can't get out any other place. They've not given any access to get out onto the highway from there. So now we got to have all of this traffic, and even the only way anybody's going out of Onewood in the morning is if you're going into Wichita, because you're not getting across that road. Nobody that lives there takes that road in the morning to try to get across to go the other direction. Okay, it doesn't happen. Now, I work for the city of Wichita, and I'm telling you that highway's not going to be there for 20 years at least. Okay, that's not coming. The next section to be done is out to 143rd, and that'll take another 8 to 10 years just for that project alone. Okay, so it's not coming like he's grandiose in this. Okay. I'm going to let some other people talk about the other things, but because they know more about it than I do on that. But the highway was mine. That's the one I want to get rid of, that one. These trees he's putting in, they're not going to be 8, 10 foot tall. Okay, they're not going to be. Okay, a 2-inch tree is maybe 5 foot tall. Okay, they can tell us all these fancy things they want, but what I'm going to say is, would you even consider this if they were wanting to put this up by Teradyne? Are we less important there than the other people are in this town? We pay our taxes. Our kids go to these schools. You're going to bring another 200 families in here that are going to put their kids in our schools, and we are not going to be able to pay to put them in the schools. Because guess what? These folks don't pay property tax. Okay? They don't pay the property tax for a new bond issue. I do. So I'm going to let somebody else have it.
Hello, my name's Kristen Bond. I live at 512 West Jamestown Court. I'm going to kind of add on to what he said about the schools. Right now, this property that is in question is going into Sunflower Elementary. Sunflower Elementary already has 3 classes per grade, and 2 of those grades are at 27, 28 kids per class, 2 students away from adding a 4th class to the grades. We're looking at, 200 minimum extra families. That's a 50-plus kids going into the school. Not only is this area zoned for Sunflower, the area right across the street from Sunflower, which is an empty land right now, is also zoned for Sunflower. That is, I believe, single family right now, but those families will be coming in as well. We tried to redistrict a few years ago, I want to say maybe 7 years ago, roughly, and that was shot down pretty quickly by families in the Andover area because they didn't want to move kids to different schools. We just put, our Sunflower is finished with the new building and safety measures and all that. And I think in the building, we have 3 extra classrooms that are not holding a regular class, but they are utilized for students with IEPs, ELP, all that extra stuff that is needed for smaller groups and stuff like that. Just ridiculous, 200 more, I can't even talk right now. But those are the numbers for the elementary school, and we cannot shove more kids into this school, especially ones that are renting. He talked about reputation of Andover. I moved out here to Andover for its reputation. So adding apartments to this beautiful city is not going to make it better. I mean, yes, it might make more money in people's pockets, but that's not what families want in Andover. We moved out to Andover for the school district. And if we flood it with kids and we can't staff it and we can't put more building or more classrooms in it, what is that going to do for us? So, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Titus Cordero. I live in 813 Sunset Circle, retired military, and I'm a program manager over at Spirit. I had a couple of questions to the guy that presented earlier. I didn't get your name, sir. Jason Gish. I'm talking here because we encountered the exact same thing. I live over behind Dillon's, and they built a big giant apartment complex over there. So I know where you guys are coming from because my son goes to that school right beside Dillon's. And when that apartment complex got moved over there and the increase of population in that area pushed my kid all the way to Cottonwood. Yeah, so that's what the reality that we had to deal with. And I know that you mentioned that we were looking at a couple of things here. And one of them was, in your own words, you were saying there was a strong demand for quality rentals here in Andover. That's verbatim, that's what you said. And I'm thinking you're underlining the word quality because there's already a lot of rental places here. There's actually 10 here in Andover. I did some research and looked at it, and there was 10 rental places already in Andover. So our population right now is about what, 15,000? So, and we have one grocery store. I know this, I feel this every day, right? I go there on a Friday, there's nothing on the shelves. I go there on a Monday, there's still nothing on the shelves. It wasn't like that till that apartment complex moved over there. So, and it's like I didn't realize that. I never attended the meeting when that was happening. But I'm attending it now because I know what you guys gonna encounter. So I'm speaking from perspective. So that's why I'm here today. And I know that he was underlying quality rental. There's a strong demand for quality rental. He said quality because there's already a lot of rental places here. That's why he was pointing out quality. One of the reasons why we moved over here, I'm originally from Washington State. When I retired from the military, I moved here to Kansas because I like the values of the people here. I like this community. We specifically picked Andover because the school here, the quality of the school here. And now, that reason alone, my family getting kicked out of that school and getting moved over, it's a big impact, right? And I know what your guys are gonna go through if this happens. I just wanted to share that with you guys. Oh. And that's all I got. Oh. Thank you for your time.
Ma'am, in the front row.
Well, almost everything I had on my mind has been covered.
Your name and address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Ernestine Russell. I live at 338 South Chippers Court, legally known as Lot 4, Block 1 of 8th Edition, which makes us the third house in on that frontage road off of Onewood, which makes us closest to whatever's going to happen to that road. And our big concern is values of property. I was in the real estate business for 35 years, building, construction, sales. And I've seen it happen over and over and over. depending on how this is done and how it's handled, our property values can really go down. And that, number one, will hurt a whole bunch of us. But number two was the noise. We already are getting some. But when we have 200 or 240 cars 24/7 coming and going, we won't get a minute's peace or sleep because they'll be coming day and night. The biggest of all those is the emission. There's going to be enough emission from those cars that it can kill 2/3 of the people in that neighborhood. And we're going to get it coming right through our windows and doors. There won't be a thing we can do about it. Now, when he talks about buffer, that was going to be one thing that we were absolutely going to beg to insist on, with not only a rock fence of some kind or concrete, but also at least 8, 10, 12-foot Austrian pines, or these trees large enough to throw this back at them. And the other secret would be, if they're going to not bring a road, bring egress and ingress next to our properties to park these cars facing us. If they keep them in the center, keep them away from us, and they've got enough room. I don't know, that was one big question of how close to our property line they plan to build these things, and where they're going to use their egress and ingress as opposed to using this backage road as part of that traffic. I didn't get a clear idea of what they plan for that. And we need to know where they're going to come and go, to come into that place, go out of that place, and not further impact us. So that we have several new babies just in our cul-de-sac, brand new babies and little bitty kids. And you know what, number one, those emissions are going to do not only to those of us who are in our later years, but those little kids and those babies are out there playing in all this. So anyway, I'm glad they addressed the schools. That was on my list. The other last thing I wanted to ask is what your plan is for your tenants. Are you going to insist and keep like a long-term lease, or are you going to use a short-term, like transient type lease, that you're going to have people coming and going every 30 to 90 days, which means your ability to check the characteristic of these people coming in off that highway, you're not going to have any ability to do that. And that's going to make us wonder about our safety with the people that you're bringing in renting those units to. I'd like to know what your plan in that regard is. If these are you're going to make 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, I know you can't make people stay if they decide to go, but at least you can do what you can to protect our safety.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Jessica Robb. I live in 810 Sandwich, and I want to say thank you to our neighbors for coming out tonight. So, one thing I want to point out is if everybody could look over the Andover, Kansas sign, and it says established 1957. Everybody see that? I moved very recently across country to move to Andover. The reason being my husband had a job opportunity with the government, and Kansas was a state that was an option. And when we read about Andover, we were so excited. We could not wait to be part of this community. This is a great community. 1957, we are a young community. Okay, we have built a really good reputation, you guys have. Not me, I just moved here, but you guys have. And I want to stress the importance of these multifamily complexes. They do not bring value to the community. They will downgrade the community. They will increase crime. They will decrease the community value, the transient community, and we will see a degrade in our home values because my husband's already putting the for sale sign on for us. So when that happens, we're in an opportunity we can sell low. And what's that going to do? It's going to bring in people that are not committed to our community. Now, I will say one thing to the gentleman who presented. Sir, what was your name again? Excuse me. Jason? So when you're presenting to the community of people and you're trying to get support from, I will ask you to please make sure that you give us something that we can read. I don't know about you guys, but I can't read what you put up there. And that is insulting to the community. So just want to point that out. We moved cross-country to be a member of Andover, and it saddens me to see this. Wichita is growing very quickly. And what happens when communities grow? I had liberty of traveling, so I lived in Chicago, Baltimore, and Nashville very recently. And when these cities grow, we put a lot of impact on renovation in these cities like Wichita. We move people who they don't want in Wichita anymore, they move out to the outliers. And that will degrade our community very quickly. So I would like just for you guys to think about these things as you move forward. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairperson, if I can interrupt for 1 second. So to those members of the community that are here and also the applicant, one thing I would like to correct in Mrs. Rob's statements was that was a city technical glitch in the presentation. So the applicant did provide us with a presentation that was formatted properly. We had some technical issues, but we now have it fixed. So I just wanted to clear that up. And we can provide all of this to you guys if you contact city staff. We'll provide all that to you.
When are you going to take a vote on this? Not tonight, I hope.
And we can address some of those questions after the public, after the chairperson, after all of you guys have a chance to be heard, so we can address specific questions at that time.
So will we be allowed to come back again before your final decision?
Yes, and I can elaborate on that more once all the public comment has been heard.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hi, Brian Cox, 232 South Duffers. I wanted to talk about the PUD restrictions that are currently in place. I believe that they currently do support the infrastructure we have in place and that we should not lift the restrictions. I think that's the immediate question at hand. The corridor study from 2011 is pretty stale right now, so I would question, has the traffic loads that have in the corridor study been revised, or are those still 9 years old? I think that bears investigation. As mentioned by previous commenters, the traffic load is going to come in through Onewood, head down to Egress Road there on the side, or back road, and cut across. Another question is annexation. Is there additional land to the east of this parcel that's going to need to be annexed to connect that? On the infrastructure, just my rough math here, 200 units, 1,000 units each, back into some cap numbers. It's $15 million investment probably, maybe a little bit north of that. 45% neighborhood revitalization tax abatement for 5 years. I presume you'd be applying for that as well. That's a lot of lost tax revenue for the city. If you do some more numbers on the people coming in, 200 units, a kid and a half each, 30% of them are in school. It's 100 kids coming in. I know some other people have talked about that. 100 kids, they're going to schools. If you assume half of them are going to an elementary school, that's 10 per grade that's coming into a school right now. You're losing tax revenue, which is already lower than average at a single family on a multifamily. How do you support the infrastructure? I know the neighborhood or the corridor study has this mixed-use residential, but I believe at the current time, there's not a funding plan. Until we have a funding plan, a thought-out plan of how do we support that additional infrastructure, I think we leave the restrictions. Thanks.
Gentleman in the back.
I'm Brian Edom at 419 Concord. And the previous map, I could show you where I live. It's where the little dip is. We actually built the house where that last little dip is our corner. When we built the house, this was supposed to all be residential. We thought, great, that would be nice. And then we hadn't been there very long, and Jay Russell bought it. I forget what he wanted to do. But we built next to a planned unit development so that nothing is supposed to change. The original was residential, but since then we've had other things. I did visit with when they were putting the apartments in last time, and I don't think some of these houses were in there yet, and the realtors were telling them, oh yeah, this is going to be residential, and a lot of people did buy into that. But it was residential when we bought it. But it's kind of hard to plan how you want to structure your life around that when everything keeps changing. Another thing that we had talked with them of maybe buffering it with townhomes around that would be different size roofs, different size townhomes where it looked more like residential for the residents that are already around there. So I'd like you to take that in consideration, the buffering. A street with little trees isn't going to be enough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Santiago Vera Torres. I live on 349 South Pictures Court. I see a lot of my neighbors here. We all have kids. I don't have a fence. Actually, my house is almost the last one over there. So they are proposing to put a street there where a lot of our kids are playing. So I believe that we all want to be in a safe neighborhood. They want to make it, look at our logo. I can see clouds and the sun, right? I don't want to go out in my yard and see a building instead of seeing the sun or the clouds. Also, I don't have a fence because I want to see the green. This neighborhood is called Green Valley. Are we going to change it to Building Valley now? So why are we putting a race of our children? Because all of us has a lot of children. You have to come in the summer and you have to see all the children playing as we all know each other. And that's the reason I moved to Andover, because I used to live in Wichita. The schools were not great. I didn't know anybody at the school. Now I know all the parents. They know me as well. So I want to keep that type of neighborhood that we have. And I want to, those trees are going to take 20 years to grow. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be soon. So we are talking, putting a street, endanger our kids, and they are not going to be able to play anymore because that's what they do. They all go around and they play around the neighborhood, which is not going to happen. Plus, we're going to have noise problems as well, having that street. How many cars are we bringing? How many cars are we bringing to our neighborhood? Are we going to have a plan of having another street, another entrance? What are the other plans that they have for the future? I want to hear those plans as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board. My name's Alan Winter. I live at 412 Williamsburg Court. Moved to Andover in 1979, so I've been here a while. I can appreciate the situation you are because I served on the Andover Planning Board for some years. I'd like to read something that's on the website for the Planning Board. It says, "The Planning Board and Zoning Department are committed to providing the community with high-quality services, programs to enhance the quality of life of the city of Andover's residents." And you see the residents here. Are there any residents here that are in favor of this? No. So, Board, you have the responsibility to look out for the residents, not the future residents, but the people that have invested their time, their money, and their homes, and their lives here, and their children are going to school here. This gentleman wants relief for his situation, but another way to say it, he wants to be able to make his purchase of this land more profitable. And at the expense of the residents, I don't think that's right. The residents don't.
Mr. Chairperson, if I may interrupt the public forum
Yes,
for
ma'am.
1 second. One comment from Mr. Winter that I'd like to bring to your guys' attention. Legally speaking, and land use decisions, the comment about the attendance of those attending the public forum, whether or not they support or do not support a land use decision or application, is not legally allowed to be considered. So for your information as our planning commission, please keep that in mind.
I have a public hearing.
So you guys can consider the comments that are made at the podium, but comments made from the gallery, whether that's an attendance, is not allowed.
Come on. Everybody wants to vote.
Please.
Well, that's what he's asking for, sir. Your name.
Okay. Hi, my name's Julie Armstrong. I live at 333 South Pitchers Court. From the look of how it lines out, it looks like my backyard is going to have minimal trees when I am looking at this. I just want to be clear, sir, that did the presentation. It looks like where the drive is, it's going to be right in my backyard. My question is it going to be gated? Because if it is, then you are going to have red parking lights on our backyard the whole night. I mean, our window is right there. We have a walkout basement, so I mean, right up above is where we're going to see everything. I mean, are there possibilities of putting berms in to put the trees on top of a berm so that, I mean, that would be, I mean, I never understood that doing this access road was going to put my backyard as the entrance to the apartment complex, because then you're going to have people who aren't coming in that are gated, they're being turned away, and just a lot of extra craziness that I don't want in my backyard. I mean, I've lived out here for 10 years now, paying towards the schools. My daughter is actually in one of the classrooms that already has 29 kids at Sunflower. 29 kids in her classroom, no teacher's aide, there's no assistance. And one thing I've noticed recently in that is that we were always rated 9s on all the great schools. We are now listed as not rated. I don't know if our administration has pulled it, but if you go to the testing scores, those are not as high as they used to be. If we bring in more transient, it's harder for the kids to learn. I've worked in a school for many years. It's hard for them to learn because they may travel every 3 months. You might get a kid for 3 months. Those are, if they're here when they're testing, they're going to bring down our ratings. And we don't have the staff, as the gentleman said whose son got moved to Cottonwood, we don't have the staff to support special needs students in the way that they should be given in a local school. It's a situation that's sad. And what will happen if they do get rated again and our grades are low? If we come in at a 2 or a 3, all of our property values are going to drop. It's not just going to be Green Valley. If the high school is not rated a 9 anymore, who's going to move out here and pay the extra property taxes to go to a school that's rated a 3 that's just like the ones in Wichita? I mean, I don't know that they would drop that much, but even a 6, you're going to think, well, I could move here, pay tons of property taxes, or move to Circle District and not pay those and have quality education at that same level. People are moving here because they see the 9s, they see the 8s, they see the above average on the ratings. But if you go to the great schools, we're not rated right now. It's only showing up on the apps for the realtor, but I don't know how long that'll be until it drops off. So I just want you to consider that doing something even to just Sunflower or our neighborhood could in fact affect everything. And I know there's a lot more rental communities moving in also, but that's what I have to say.
I wasn't planning on saying anything. I'm Elizabeth Tomas, and I live at 329 South Pitchers Court. I'm actually next door neighbors with Julie, and then on the same street as Santiago, who spoke earlier. I actually moved out to Andover a year ago with on my own with my 3 sons, who are all in elementary school at Sunflower. I ended up purchasing a home in Green Valley, the one on Pitchers Court, almost a year ago, with the plan and the understanding of knowing that big space right behind my house was going to be a church potentially someday, which I think felt like I could live with that, and that was fine. With the church, you only have 2 to 3 days a week with activities, cars every so often. You know when the traffic is going to be there. This, on the other hand, is like my worst nightmare. I have 3 young boys, all under the age of 12, that I'm responsible to keep safe. I would have never guessed there would be an access road literally right behind my house. And to make matters worse, there's not going to be a stone fence or any actual barrier to keep my children from that access road and from people who are accessing that road throughout the day. I made an investment in this home and in this neighborhood and in this community moving from Wichita, and it just makes me really disappointed. I'm also affected with the kids. I've got a child with 28 kids in their class, and then I hear every other day about a new kid joining or another kid leaving. I mean, it's just constant motion, constant new kids, and constant leaving, based, I think, on a lot of that transient behavior. I'm all about people getting a fresh start and wanting to get into Andover schools. I totally get it. I did the same thing with my sons. But I'm in agreement with the single-family, home kind of thing, rather than this giant, massive apartment complex behind my house that's so peaceful. And Santiago said it best, where I didn't let my kids run around the streets in Wichita because I didn't trust that they were going to be safe. I felt like people out here kept a much better eye out for each other's children and actually cared. And I feel like this is just such a detriment to what I envisioned my children getting raised in Andover was going to be like. So that's it. Thank you.
My name is Chad Armstrong. I live at 333 South Pitchers Court. My wife Julie was speaking about the schools just a little bit ago. I would just like to say I feel like this is about more than just Green Valley. I think that we also have to think about the other resources within our community that will be required to support this, whether it's law enforcement. We had the gentleman mention the grocery store earlier and how many people are going to that one location. But when you think about the resources that are required to support our community as a whole, I think that should be taken into consideration too. This isn't going to just affect those of us that are living right on the property line there. The other question that I had was whether this land has actually been paid for yet, or if that's still pending.
That's not for us to answer, sir.
Okay.
Is it pending on zoning?
Is it pending on the zoning? Yeah.
Mr. Chairperson, so if you guys have, if anyone has questions for the applicant, they're more than welcome to ask at the podium. If the applicant chooses to respond to those questions, they will have time after the public forum is closed.
name is Todd Duggins, and at 425 Jamestown. My biggest concern is everybody's talking about Onewood, but your two back roads there, if everybody uses the north road, that puts this development using the infrastructure of the neighborhood behind it, rather than addressing access to Kellogg or a way out on their own property. The second road isn't even developed. So are we talking 15 years from now, 10 years? So we have 200 plus units. And when they want to go to Andover, they're not going to pull out to Kellogg. They're going to drive right up to that frontage road or the back road, and they're going to go to Jamestown. And Jamestown is going to, it's a 2-lane residential road. You are inundating traffic through that neighborhood. It is not fair by any means.
I had been in property management the last 10 years that I worked.
Your name and address, please?
Mary Lee Armstrong, 425 West Jamestown. Anyway, we're talking about 200 apartments. We're not talking about 200 cars. We're talking about 400 cars. You know, the kids, I'm the only one on my block that has one car. You know, that's all I can drive at a time. The traffic on Jamestown is bad as it is. I've lost my mailbox. You know, they're out at the curb. It was smashed. Nobody stopped, of course, but my son had to replace it. You know, apartments, it's law enforcement, it's security companies. We want our neighborhood as it is. That's really it, you know. Thank you.
Ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jamie Lint, 943 West Threewood Court. Sorry, I'm nervous. Couple of things that I just want to point out. The houses that are on Woodwood are already really close to the road, so that's my point. My house backs up right there where that street could potentially dump out. We are all pretty close to that street already. So the trees aren't really going to make a lot of difference because Onewood's busy today. So those are things to consider. Also, the other thing that I want to point out is in our neighborhood, we have rental houses today. And you can tell when you're driving through, myself and my neighbor here, we take care of our houses, but you can tell, even though they charge $1,800 for those houses on the golf course, you can drive through, you can tell who owns a house, you can tell who rents a house. The property value will decrease. The other thing that I'd like to ask the gentleman here in the committee is there a study that's been done for what rentals do to our property values? And what that will do for us as homeowners, because we pay our taxes and we're supporting the community. I don't think they will. That's it. Thank you.
Gentleman in the back.
So my name's Mark Malinauskas, and I live in 523 West 2nd Street, which is north, okay? But I can tell you right now that 2nd Street is impacted by the traffic that comes off of Kellogg, goes through Onewood, goes down Lyoba, and turns left or right on 2nd Street. That's today. If you guys took an aerial view, you would see cars go through like ants. And one thing that you should remember is people are like water. They are going to find the path of least resistance, no matter what they do in life or what they do with a car. So if there's a way to find a quicker way, people are going to find it. Now the Kellogg expansion, you can throw that out the window. We're talking about, I don't know when these are going to be built, within a year, but it's going to affect Onewood tomorrow. And the people in 2nd Street and Lyoba and Jamestown are all going to be affected. Please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Sir.
Richard Tyler, 717 West Point Court. I used to live on 2nd Street, and we moved from there after the development over here by Dillon's was done. The traffic increased on 2nd Street, and we have small children. We're raising 3 grandkids. And once that was done, the impact on that area, even though they live way out there, people racing around up and down that street, and we finally moved. We lived at West Point Court now, and the traffic over there, we've called the police, and all my neighbors around have, it's like a racetrack around Green Valley, Cedar Park, Shadow Rock. That whole area over here is like a racetrack now. We have kids playing out in the street. We live on a cul-de-sac. People come and do donuts in the cul-de-sac and take off. By the time the police arrive, they're long gone. You try and get license plate, you know, they're most of them seem like they're kind of junky cars. A lot of the ones we've seen lately have temporary tags, and nothing seems to be done about that. But my question that I would like to ask is, anybody asked the local police department if they've done any type of study on the percentage of crime increase in Andover since that new development was in place there, and what they think the impact this would be? Has anybody spoken to the police department about that? Any kind of crime study about that and what it'll impact our area? Do we think that that ought to be done?
Sir, you're addressing the wrong board for that.
Well, I don't know who, I mean, this is all part of our...
That needs to go to the city council, sir. We're here on building codes and enforcement on that.
Well, are we going to be able to talk to the city council about this before
Once the vote takes place this evening,
okay,
it goes to city council.
I see.
We don't have the final vote on it. We vote on whether or not the criteria is there to meet our building codes and changes in the zoning.
All right. I'm sorry, I didn't understand how this quite worked.
I think there are many questions that have been addressed to us that we don't have answers for.
Okay.
We can't answer.
Well, I've lived here for 23 years. My wife has lived here since 1982. And when I moved here, Andover was a nice, quiet little community, and that's why my wife decided to stay. Her parents are from here. They used to live on West Point, 319 West Point, or Westview down there. And they built that Dillon's there. It used to be a big open field. They had cattle there and everything. They built the Dillon's there. And then they put a concrete wall, and they have the Chinese food place and Taco Bell and all that there. And the increased noise and everything from that, even though they have that block wall there, that big concrete wall, the increased noise and the traffic from there really impacted their area. And I don't know how long this is going to take for this development to complete, probably, 3-4 years. But you're looking at a terrible eyesore in construction and early morning, people that work at night or whatever, you're going to have, this is going to be a terrible noise and eyesore for years until they get this finally completed. In 20-25 years for those trees to even grow up and be some kind of a barrier, it's just kind of unacceptable. And everybody's pointed out the traffic congestion problems. If for some reason you guys do go with this, they ought to open up the middle of that and have access to Kellogg from their actual apartment complex instead of accessing the neighborhood roads. There's plenty of room there for that with the frontage road and the access there, if that would be addressed. But I worked for almost 9 years for AT&T and doing installations in apartment complexes like this and the one over there by Dillon's. 30% of the residents I went through there there was drug use going on in those residents. And I just think that this is just a terrible impact on our neighborhood, and I just don't want to see it going up in there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to get someone else new first. Okay? Yes, sir.
Torrey Pitchford, 314 West Concord. I'm not going to address all the issues they have. They've done a great job of pointing out that there seems to be nothing positive in this development for any of us. My bigger concern right now is with the presentation itself. One, it was pointed out we couldn't read it. You fixed that. That still didn't fix the font size. We still couldn't read anything. But you did a great job of pointing out anything you thought was good, Mr. Gish, but you completely glossed over any potential concerns. What your comment was, yeah, there will be growth in traffic, growth in people at the store, but we're planning for it. I mean, tell us how you're planning for it. Tell us how we're mitigating that to make it better. When someone comes and presents one side of an argument and ignores everything else, it makes me wonder what they're hiding. What do they see that they realize there's all these faults with it, which I think we pointed out well tonight, that they're too scared to go ahead and address those up front and make us go through all of this. And for you, since you keep telling us only what we say up here matters, I will go on the record and say I'm completely opposed to this, just for your benefit.
Gentleman in the back. Sir, he's not spoken yet.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see his hand. He's behind you.
Dennis Howard, 331 Chippers Court. My wife and I moved to Andover as transplants from Nashville 10 years ago. Knew nothing of Kansas, knew nothing of Wichita. We come to work for Textron Aviation. The only reason we moved to Andover was the reputation of the school system and the city. It was a single-family city. It's how it was portrayed on everything that we read. The school system was the best in the Wichita area. We have 3 children. We came here for the schools. I have 1 son left in the Andover Central School System. And I don't want to be that statistic that you was talking about where the kids get out of school and you move out of Andover. But I don't want to live right behind an apartment complex either. So I'm asking you to reject this offer. Thank you.
I'll allow you to come up. Is there something new that you...
It is, because it's become very clear in this. Darren Dycher, 813 Sandwich Court. It's become very clear in this that a lot of us were believing that this was at a different level than it's at. Okay? You guys, we're not going to tug on your heartstrings. Okay? You're here for one job and one job only, and that's to approve this.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. That doesn't mean it that way. It's your job to either approve or disapprove it. Okay? So let's work on that. When somebody comes to give you a presentation, then don't come with these grandiose things about highways and all of this. Let's have a new plan. Have him bring in a plan for their own access from Kellogg, okay, to their property. Stay off of Onewood. Get rid of that road at the back, okay? They don't need that, all right? If you want to approve this, which is what's going to happen more than likely, it happens 90% of the time. Okay? I hope it doesn't. I really do. But make them do the work. Don't come in here with a 10-year or 11-year-old study, okay, about traffic. Don't come in here giving us all these numbers about how this great new Kellogg is going to relieve all of this issue. It's not, okay? That's not going to be it. Make them go back, make them do the work that is required in order for you to do your job correctly. Because they've given you nothing tonight that is going to tell you that this is going to work. Okay? They've given you a pretty little picture of what it might look like, but they're talking about a highway that's not existent. They're talking about nothing about what they're going to do about all the traffic that might go down through Onewood. They've got a road back there that goes to nowhere. Okay? All I'm asking you is to make them do their job. And that is bring you something that's viable for what the conditions are now, not what they might be 20 years from now when that highway comes through. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, anything new? Okay.
So my new point is I moved to Andover in 2001 with my family, and my children went through the Andover schools, and we moved here because of what they had to offer. I had one other point, I probably forgot it, but it had to do with the traffic flow, and I lost it, so I'm sorry.
All right, sir.
One more quick comment / recommendation. Brian Cox, 232 South Duffers. I recommend that if the commission does vote to remove the restrictions, they do not do so unmodified. I recommend that commission modifies the restriction removal and requires a further setback with a 6-foot berm and an 8-foot stone retaining wall to the north. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Could I say one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
It just dawned on me when they talked those 3-story buildings, they're going to be able to look right into our bedroom windows, our patio windows, and right into our homes. Because they're going to be that close. Now, he talked about how they could offset, maybe do this, do that. But even a 2-story, most of us are raised ranches, in other words, of glorified bi-level. We have walkout basements, but we also have high decks, and our living quarters are up there. And most of us have huge, beautiful, big windows. Think about a 2-story apartment. Everything we do, everything they do, they're going to be looking right at us. And if it's a 3-story, then we're really in trouble, which means we will use our windows to keep our drapes pulled and closed because we won't have any other choice. We'll have no privacy. Thank you.
All right, then, if there's no further comments from the public, I'm going to invite Mr. Gish back up to the podium to answer any questions that he's willing to.
Thank you. Just trying to listen to your comments. I just, and staff may be able to help me here, but I just want to remind everyone, we're simply, the property is already platted. We're simply here asking for a slight adjustment to basically take this back to the way the PUD was prior to the last application and approval, which would basically allow it to go back to a multifamily use. Things like traffic solutions, as you well know, those things are solved at a different time, a different period. And I guess I did want to just mention to the public, you know, without you taking this more wrong than you're going to take it, the city spends extreme amount of resources with what you're doing with your tax dollars to try to figure out how to help Andover be a successful community. And it's very hypocritical when you sit here and you say that you get to have, hold on. listen, when you sit here.
Let them speak, okay?
When you sit
Everybody
here,
has an opportunity.
It would be like saying that no more kids can come to school in Andover because only the ones that got here first could do that. Go talk to your school board perhaps about that, because the school board is really the responsible entity that's going to make sure that you take care of your schools to the best way possible. That's not a job that the planning, you can burden them with. I guess you can skew lines and ideas to think that, but there are rights that that an applicant has to develop the property, and once again, the property was for sale. If somebody wanted to make it green forever, that could happen. But the reality is the community is going to develop, and so the process here is really not to be adversarial towards you, but it's here to try to help you. And so the applicant is trying to do his best job to find something that will work well in this community. And yes, he likes to make a living, just like anybody else.
One of those houses next to it?
Sir?
I'm just giving you the reality that something is going to develop there. If you think that Andover can stay just like it is, then
Work at the golf course, we'll put a park there.
then it's for
Please.
sale. It's America.
Let
You
Mr.
can buy
Hughes
those.
finish.
So just wanted to remind us that we're not here to solve traffic yet. Those are things that would be part of the platting process. It's already platted. Those things are dealt with every day by the city and working with their traffic engineers to do this. Once again, the school district is going to solve the issues of how to provide a good education for all the students. I think all of you probably graduated from school, and I'm wondering how many of you bought a single-family house right off the bat. I guarantee you that not all of you did. All of us lived in an apartment, so it's shameful to say that people are less important than you are. I've been listening to these. It's my time. I've been listening to these debates, and it's just unfortunate that you do this to our applicant. But anyways, we're here trying to do the best we can. We're not going to be able to leave the property as it is. The intent is for the property to be developed by anyone that would choose to try to go through that venture. I'm not here to explain how the developer might try to determine how he intends to rent his business, what his business rental model is. I don't know those. We can ask him if he wants to expound upon those. I do apologize for the small text. I tried to explain it. I'd be glad to try to answer any more questions, but we have gone above and beyond. I'd like to remind you that we technically, per the zoning code, don't have to do anything more than 2.5 trees, along the edge. But we're trying to make a gesture in goodwill that we want to be a good neighbor and do more, 2.5 to 3 times more than what the code says in screening. Multifamily will generate more tax revenue. I heard some concerns about, hey, this tax, but multifamily is going to generate much more tax revenue than a tax exempt church. And then as far as traffic, just wanted to mention that single family is calculated at roughly, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I just read the information that's published. Single family trips per day, as they explain, is about 9.5 on a single family residence. So each one of your lots times 9.5 trips is how many cars are moving through the neighborhood. Multifamily, because they have more younger families, they only have half the amount of trips per day. So it's actually less traffic. And go Google it if you wish. You'll find the same answer. Go just continue to look at resources. And anyhow, if there's any other questions that I maybe missed on just the zoning side of it, I just, once again, just simply put, we're trying to go above and beyond. We're showing diagrams and trying to be provide a good application and information so that you can make your decision. And I really applaud our applicant here. They said, they weren't sitting there saying do minimum on everything. They wanted to try to be put a very good will of gesture forward on what would be a quality multifamily product here. Thank you.
Ma'am.
I'll let the city staff address those, but it's already platted. There has to be some things done that I'm sure that those things will happen. They have to be calculated and studied. We're only here to decide zoning, and we're simply asking for the zoning to strike the church uses, as I mentioned, and allow the MXR multifamily residential back in. Thank you.
Ma'am.
They want you, you don't know how you're going to get them in and out.
Ma'am, those questions can be asked at a later time, we are here to run the zoning business this evening, to whether approve.
That's pretty significant toward changing zoning.
That's all to be determined later, ma'am, with site planning and all the infrastructure questions. It's not for zoning.
Please don't accept this.
I'm sorry?
We beg you, please don't accept this.
There's legal, there's right or wrong.
That's,
All right, let go.
Okay, comments need to stay at the bench at this point. We've closed the public hearing portion, so we need to keep the comments from the bench, please.
unless any written communications?
No, we have none.
All right. Hearing no further comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless Commission wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The Planning Commission will now deliberate the request. There are 14 factors which the Commission must consider in order to make findings and ultimately a recommendation. Okay.
You got it?
This report is to assist the Planning Commission to determine their findings from the evidence presented at the hearing so as to base their rezoning recommendation on the required 14 factors found in Article 12 of the zoning regulations. The responses provided need to be evaluated with the evidence and reworded as necessary to reflect the Planning Commission's considered opinion. Sample motions are provided to ensure the accuracy of the motion and facilitate the summary of the hearing for the minutes. Conditions attached to the motion, if any, should be carefully worded to provide instructions to the applicant and facilitate enforcement by the zoning administrator. Staff items. Number 1, do adequate sewage disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist, or can they be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the subject property if the change in zoning were approved? Staff, the subject property is currently platted and provisions for adequate public water, sewer, and streets have been made. Concur?
Concur.
2, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted, or have in lieu of dedications made in order to provide needed rights-of-way, easements, building setback lines, or access control? Staff comment, the subject property is currently platted and with adequate road rights-of-way, dedications made for the future backage road, and US 54-400 freeway improvements. However, the current access controls on Onewood Drive do not reflect those required by the US 54-400 corridor study. Concur?
Yes. Concur.
3, if the zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need a screening plan for existing or potential uses? Staff, a landscape buffer consisting of planting materials, berms, walls, or fences is required between the proposed MXR uses and the existing single-family uses by the Site Plan Review Standards table of required landscape buffers.
Concur.
4, what fact-based information in support of or in opposition to the requested zoning change has staff received? Staff has received verbal commentary from nearby neighbors that the proposed use for apartments is not compatible with the existing single-family residential neighborhood and could have an effect on property values. However, no fact-based evidence has been submitted.
Concur.
5, if there has been an error in the application of these zoning regulations to the subject property, would the requested zoning change correct the error? Staff, no error is known to exist.
Concur. Concur.
6, how suitable or unsuitable is the subject property for its current zoning? Staff, the subject property is suitable for the existing permitted use for a church and related accessory uses.
Concur.
Concur. 7, is the length of time the subject property has been vacant or undeveloped under its current zoning a factor in the zoning change request? Staff, yes. The subject property has been undeveloped because its sole permitted uses have been limited to a church and related accessory uses.
Concur. Concur.
8, how reasonably well-suited will the requested zoning change of the subject property be with the current zoning of nearby properties? Staff, in comparison to the existing permitted use as a church and related accessory uses, the proposed multiple family uses would be similar in building scale, potential traffic trip generation at peak times, lighting, noise, activity, etc., particularly if the existing related accessory uses of a senior center, child care center, educational facilities, and recreational uses were to have been developed. The subject property has good access to the highway both presently and in the future freeway condition.
Concur.
9, has the zoning change been requested because conditions in the area of the subject property have changed or are changing? If so, what is the nature and significance of these conditions? Staff, yes. The potential user of the church and related accessory uses has abandoned their plans and sold the subject property.
Concur. Concur.
10, what are the current land uses, character, and condition of the subject property and the surrounding neighborhood? Staff, the subject property is adjacent to US 54-400 on the south, with commercial uses and older structures on the south side of the highway. Surrounding the property on the northwest, north, and northeast are single-family residences in good condition, separated from the subject property by platted streets and a reserve. Adjacent to the west of the subject property is a two-family residential development. Adjacent to the east is a vacant parcel and a single-family residence directly abutting the highway.
Concur. Concur.
11, would the proposed zoning change of the subject property allow land uses which might have detrimental effects on nearby properties, and if so, how? Staff, in comparison to the existing permitted use as a church and related accessory uses, the proposed multiple family uses would be similar in building scale, potential traffic generation at peak times, lighting, noise, activity, etc., particularly if the existing related accessory uses of a senior center, child care center, educational facilities, and recreational uses were to have been developed. The proposed use would likely not produce the large peaks of activity associated with the currently permitted church, but rather have a more consistent pattern.
Concur.
12, how would the requested zoning change conform with the city's comprehensive plan and other adopted master plan and policies? Staff, the future land use map in the comprehensive plan depicts the subject property to be in the US 54-400 lifestyle corridor and refers to the US 54-400 corridor study, which states the intersections of US 54-400 and Onewood Drive and US 54-400 and Yorktown Road are proposed to be mixed-use residential. In addition, there are several other blocks designated mixed-use residential in the area between the YMCA facility and the commercial mixed use along Prairie Creek Road. This designation allows for 6 to 20 dwelling units per acre in 2 to 5 story buildings with 50 to 70% lot coverage. Retail and community services should be on the ground floor with a mix of residential uses above. To accommodate changing market conditions, both horizontal and vertical mix of uses are encouraged. For a detailed map of proposed land use, please see Figure 26. Do you concur?
Concur. Yes.
Number 13. Do any professional persons knowledgeable on conditions that affect this zoning change request have information or recommendations to provide which would be helpful in its evaluation? Staff, the approved site plan for the proposed 51-foot, 3-inch tall church building first phase, which covered only about 40% of the plus or minus 12-acre property, included seating for 878 occupants, a 196-stall parking lot with 25-foot tall light poles, and provisions for future additions with an additional 245 parking spaces, the planned senior center, child care facility, educational facility, and recreational uses could have potentially filled the remainder of the site with uses that could operate 7 days a week, including evenings, generating a combined volume of traffic in the hundreds of trips in the peak hours. The proposed 20 dwelling units per acre multiple family residential development could potentially yield up to a maximum of 236 dwelling units in 3-story buildings up to 45 feet in height, with 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit required. Activities would similarly occur 7 days a week. The applicant has provided language in the proposed planned unit development amendment text, which provides for the required landscape buffer in addition to the separation provided by the backage road street and screening reserve. When comparing the proposed multifamily residential development to the existing permitted church and related accessory uses, the effects on the surrounding area seem very similar. 1, both uses have the potential to generate significant peak hour traffic, but are well suited to the access US 54-400. 2, both uses have the potential to be large buildings, 45 feet in height or greater, which incidentally could have the effect of reducing US 54-400 traffic noise. 3, both uses require large areas for parking. 4, both uses further the goal of the comprehensive plan to extend a backage road providing local traffic access between Onewood Drive and Andover Road off to the highway system. Staff relies heavily on the comprehensive plan, including the attached US 54-400 corridor study, which suggests that the subject property is suited for the mixed-use residential at densities of up to 20 dwelling units per acre in buildings up to 5 stories in height in supporting the proposed amendment. Do you concur?
Concur.
Concur.
14. How would the potential loss in value or hardship imposed on the applicant compare to the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare if there is a change from the current zone to the requested zone? Staff, there has been no evidence presented to staff that would indicate any loss or gain to the public, health, safety, or welfare resulting from the proposed change as compared to the existing permitted uses. Concur?
Concur.
Okay. Any discussion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there have been a lot of points brought up by the residents of Green Valley. I could take issues in my own neighborhood that would counter everything that they said. Noise, traffic, people looking into my house from my neighborhood, things like that. I mean, we can't address everything. We can't address everybody's issue in the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission. We are here just to look at changing the zoning. We can't address what the school does. We can't address what the city council's going to do. We can only make a recommendation to them. We can't force the police or the infrastructure. We're only here to do our responsibility. And I understand what you're all talking about. I moved to Andover in 1981. I've lived in 4 different homes in 4 different areas, all for different reasons. But I still have some of the same issues. There's a racetrack in front of my house. I've called the police. They've set out a speed zone. It hasn't changed anything. My neighbors behind us just defaulted on their loan and left their house a mess. What am I supposed to do about it? What's the city going to do about it? I can't control what my neighbors or the people who come here do. We can't do that for you either. We understand. No, we can't. We can't do that. You tell my neighbor to quit defaulting on his mortgage.
No, we're saying you guys can, right now. You guys can help us out. You're going to do this. We don't want apartments in Andover. There's plenty.
This is the first step. You can do something about this now, right here.
Any other comments? No. Discussion? No. Having discussed and reached conclusions on our findings of fact, I would remind the Commission that a proper motion should reflect the factors on which it is based. And if approval is recommended, then consideration should be given to any conditions that might be attached. Is there a motion to either recommend approval, modification and approval, disapproval, or to table the discussion?
So I do have a question then. I know that the applicant mentioned, putting restrictions on the height of the building or limiting the building height closer to the residential development. Is that anything that we need to put into this motion at this time, or is that going to be more of a site planning platted question? As far as if we just, we're going off of his word right now.
You could make whatever conditions you see fit.
Having seen that, does anyone feel like we would need more time to make those considerations?
Any comment, Alex?
Yeah, I'm thinking that through.
After just kind of...
Question, as far as to the table the discussion, is that your...
That's what I'm considering.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask something, but Jason's getting up.
Do you want to?
I could ask your question, or answer the question related to height proposed if you were looking for it and what we proposed. And in the provisions, we had listed 45 feet, 3-story. So thought I heard that, but maybe I didn't.
Right.
Correctly.
Just to address you since you're up at the podium then, because in your statement you were, you would propose the consideration of limiting the structure size closer to the residential while keeping the larger structures further away, in some type of mixed use of those structures.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all determined, right now by the developer. So my consideration is do we actually put that into the, our recommendation of requiring that accommodation on the property? But if so, how would we manage that with the length and depth of this property to be able to actually specify where we'd want those restrictions and trying to come to a middle ground?
Well, I know you have a couple buildings on the north side of the property along the residential area there, but you also have two perpendicular on the east and the west side I mean, do you
Right.
restrict those two as well on either end, since their portion of their building is, on the north property line, towards the north property line?
Right, and those are things that I would,
Yeah.
be considering, and that's why I almost was considering whether or not we needed to pause this decision for more consideration to where we can actually see some of that information after getting all the feedback here and the time that we've had here. So, I mean, it is kind of a unique, there's buildings kind of in all different directions. There's
Right.
not really a single line or description that we could use for that type of determination.
So Les, for my own clarification, what would that look like with what Alex said? Would that be revisited at the March meeting, discussions in between? What would that look like?
I think what I'm hearing him say is he would continue the public hearing to the March meeting. I don't know that there is any additional information that could be provided in that time. I think the applicant has shown you the view sheds from the backyards of the adjacent structures, both to 2-story and 3-story units.
Right.
With a distance between the back of the existing homes and the north wall of the proposed apartments in the neighborhood of 230 feet. If you wanted to make that a condition, I would suggest through some math that what they're suggesting is that the face of the apartment buildings is something like 190 to 200 feet from the existing single-family residential neighborhood rear property lines. If you were to add that as a condition, it could be some pretty simple verbiage to put a restriction on that 200 feet dimension.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the applicant while he's up there and the staff. Correct. I'm sorry, guys, it's my first meeting, so if I'm out of line, please let me know. But a big concern, and I don't mean to diminish any of the concerns, but a big concern that was brought up was about screening, talking about the trees and taking a while to maturity. And I know that the applicant is going above and beyond what's in the code now, but is there any consideration to one of those walls, if you will, an 8-foot wall or a retaining wall or I don't want to call it a solid surface wall in lieu of vegetation? It takes a while to get to maturity and to maybe help appease some of those comments.
Yeah, sure. I believe, if my recollection serves me, that there's maybe a couple residents that do not have fences currently. The screening could include a fence, as you state. I don't know that we're opposed to that, but it's already kind of there. We'd like to make as many improvements as we can with just the landscape. We think that's a nicer gesture, but with the space. But that's just a single opinion. So I believe the intention of the applicant is they don't necessarily want to. They want to have a more open feel, so I think they want to have a gated community for the apartments, but that probably is going to be more, maybe it's an ornamental iron fence or something like that where you're able to see through it. So I don't think their intention is necessarily to, they want it to feel open and welcoming. So, but if to the north, if there's a desire for additional screening, we open to compromises on trying to figure out how to address that with the neighborhood. I think one thing, if I could just change direction a little bit with what Mr. Mangus was mentioning. I mean, if there's a desire to try to say within 200 feet of the south edge of the neighborhood that we limit a certain height or whatever that distance is, we're not opposed to that. That's what we're trying to kind of infer with the design, and we're trying to have a little latitude. The concept is it's just where we're at. You know, we haven't tried to, we got to get to this step before we take time to try to go to the next. But the intention would be to, you know, try to graduate that up as necessary to, we still want to utilize the density that we're able to achieve. And it's, quite honestly, it's, if you look at that site plan, I think it probably represents more than the maximum units we could get. But we're just trying to give you a concept of how it could maybe feel or look.
Okay, thank you.
And then, I mean, my other concern just overall with this is, you know, it's somewhat addressed, but, you know, the traffic impact on One-Wood Drive with no lighted intersection there at Kellogg. At what point would we be looking at a traffic study for that?
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with some of the folks here tonight that say that that highway will never be. As a matter of fact, it's in the highway bill that's before the legislature as we speak. It is the second highest ranked transportation improvement in the entire Wichita metropolitan area. All indications are that it will be in this 10-year highway bill for construction as a freeway. So,
Please.
I find it interesting to hear these comments at my backside, since I do sit on the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. This is an effort that has been concentrated not only by the WAMPO organization, but the Wichita Area Chamber of Commerce Transportation Coalition, the Kansas Department of Transportation are all working towards this end, and it's a high priority. I think you'll see those improvements, Alex, in the very near future. They will begin with a study that's going to look at all these intersections and how traffic can be enhanced and how the work will be phased. Our newest Secretary of Transportation has announced that she will adopt projects on a 2-year cycle. So every 2 years there will be a new set of construction awards that go out, rather than the old ways of the past where a 10-year program was laid out and then those projects that didn't make it to construction in 10 years got kicked out further. In this instance, she intends to address things as they come up and do the appropriate studies before that work is authorized.
So do I have a motion at this time?
I just want to add one more thing. In combination, what Alex said was, you know, restrict that building height within that 200 feet, but also maybe a combination of a berm that, you know, instead of planting those trees ground level, plant them, get them a little bit higher, you know, and I understand that's not 100% fixed right away, but I just think that would be a step forward to compromise in that area.
And all of that's acceptable in a motion, Les?
Yes. Yes, you can give your site plan review committee some direction on what your expectations are as far as landscaping and berming. And as the applicant did address, there are some words of text in the proposed PUD amendment that are fairly specific to that landscape plan that was submitted.
Okay, thank you.
And then just to go on to point out that the original PUD did have this as a multifamily section of that development.
This planned unit development was actually adopted in 1980, Alex.
Okay.
Over the course of the last 40 years, there have been over 30 amendments. Several of those amendments have been in regards to this parcel. It was at one point multifamily residential intermixed with single-family residential. In the 90s, it was amended to allow all of the highway business district uses, which could have included big box retail stores, car dealerships, a lot of large buildings at 45-foot maximum height. When the church filed an amendment, they limited themselves to that 45-foot maximum height, but the underlying zone is multifamily.
Thank you, Les.
Mr. Chairman, having considered the evidence at the hearing and the factors to evaluate the application, I, Gary Israel, move that we recommend to the governing body that case number Z2020-02 be approved based on the findings of the Planning Commission on findings 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 13 as recorded in the summary of this hearing, and that the following conditions be attached to this recommendation. The conditions being that the applicant work with the site planning committee on screening, which might include a berm or a wall or a portion of a wall along the north side, and a restriction to 2-story on the north and west side of the property for buildings.
Need to specify with that.
At a distance of 200 feet from the residential area.
Could you clarify that for us, Gary? Do you intend that 200 feet to be measured from the adjacent single-family residential property?
That is
or,
correct.
Okay.
The west side is, you're talking?
Along Woodwood Drive.
Yeah.
I have a motion to approve with comments. Do I have a second?
I, Eric Peterson, second the motion with the comments.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve with comments. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passed unanimously. This case will be forwarded to the governing body with the Planning Commission's recommendation and a written summary of the hearing for consideration at their regular meeting of March 10th, 2020. The recording of this hearing will be retained for at least 60 days after the final determination is completed on this case. Protest petitions against the case, but not directed at the Commission's recommendations as such, may be received by the City Clerk for 14 days after tonight, March 3rd, 2020 at 4 p.m. 4:30, excuse me. If there are properly signed protest petitions with accurate legal descriptions from the owners of record of 20% or more of the total real property owners within the official area of notification, both inside and outside of the city, and not counting public street rights of way or specific statutorial excluded property, then such a change shall not be passed except by a 3/4 vote of all members of City Council. Are there any member items?
Absolutely not.
No.
No.
Then I need a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I, Gary Israel, make the motion to adjourn the meeting.
I have a motion to adjourn.
I, Eric Peterson, second the motion.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.